Hello and welcome to this edition of the Killen Report. I'm Jonathan Clyde, owner of the Clyde Design Group Fine Custom Cabinetry in Oakland. And we have a treat for you today. Do not, I repeat, do not touch that dial. I am so excited for not only myself, but for all of you as well. We have two phenomenal guests on our program today. The master artist, Harry Cohen, and the great artist also, Michael Killen, whose namesake this program is. Gentlemen, great to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's wonderful, wonderful. I know that you know each other. Harry, tell me how do you know each other?
Well, I'm a good friend of Leonard Brager, who is not with us anymore, and he kept telling me, you know, we had 3 classes, one down the peninsula, on the Bay Area, and one at the house. And he said, the next time I have the session at the house, I want you to meet this guy. So Marge and I went and had listened into the session. And then later, he introduced us to Michael. And for Leonard, who was so critical and had such high values on art, I thought, he must know, this kid must be good. So that's how we met.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So now you've collaborated and you know each other for how many years now, Michael?
Oh, gosh.
10.
I'll let you answer that.
I'd say 11 or 12.
Wow.
I don't remember.
So from your point of view, how does Harry influence you?
He influences me this way. He has tremendous experience and knowledge, not just about art, but about literature, music, and he has a certain spirit. I invite him to come and work with me whenever I start taking on a big project, a big painting, like maybe a 24-foot painting or a 15-foot painting. We sit down together and I share what I believe the requirement is for the painting. And Harry then says, wait a second, Michael, I think you ought to tap into Greek mythology, or you should tap into Russian literature.
I enjoy the challenge. He creates a challenge.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, so I have to respond.
Right?
So it's instinctual.
So it's a real collaborative effort.
Yeah. Well, some of it he uses, some of it don't, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a determining factor of something you won't use or you don't use? Or how do you make a choice? What to use and what not to use?
What not to use is something that, as I continue to work on the project and deepen my own understanding, it just doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit. And other things like Don Quixote. One day he said to me, Michael,
that was fun.
You ought to have, this painting you're working on is about all of us who want to go out and fight the great challenges of society that we face right now. Why don't you include Don Quixote?
We need Don Quixotes.
We do need Don Quixotes.
I wish there were more.
And you have so much energy. How old are you now?
Have I?
Yeah, how old are you?
Oh.
Go on, don't lie.
I don't recollect.
You don't recollect? More than 80.
Well, I got into the horse thing.
Yeah.
I have this horse opera thing.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a takeoff on Greek mythology.
Right.
Only I've substituted the horse and a cowboy and an Indian.
I got it.
Right.
I got it.
Right.
But now
and a maiden.
But you're
and a maiden.
But you're in your studio every day, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely.
What drives you?
That's a good question. I've often asked myself. I don't have anything to prove. Why am I so desperate to get up there? I am sometimes. I actually am desperate to get up there. Oh, I really don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Um,
But you love being there. And you couldn't, and I would imagine you can't imagine your life without it.
mm. Let Michael answer that. What do you
Yeah.
think it is, Michael?
Why
Why do I have this need?
you have this, I think, this desire, this need to create beauty and to create order. And you have a desire to look at the objects, the people around you, and to paint them in a different way, but yet still capture some familiarity with the object or the person. You have a need to create order, I think. But you know better than me.
Well, let me ask you a
No,
question.
I don't.
Harry,
No,
it
I
might be
don't.
easier. What does Michael have a need to create?
What does he have me do?
What does Michael have a need to create? What does he have to create?
Why do I paint what I paint?
Well, he kind of accepted a role as a critic of our society,
Mm-hmm.
and the common focus is our environment has gone to wherever
It's gone.
it's gone.
It's going.
It's
Or
in
there's
a desperate state.
a threat of going.
Yeah, and he's addressing the issues.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this marvelous instinctual ability to organize paint. He has what was identified in art schools as paint quality. He knows how to take that mud colored and organize it. So he's totally unintimidated. Most people who are approaching the size of these epics would be frightened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody who had a classical background, he would need drawings. He would need a cartoon. He would have to prepare himself. He would have to study. He'd have to do homework.
Right.
He just said, bang.
So,
If he has something in his head, he puts it down.
so,
He's not intimidated.
so the two of you, though, come to art from very different perspectives. You are
Absolutely.
a trained artist.
I had a classical background.
You have a class from where? Where was your classical?
5 years at the Boston Museum School
Mm-hmm.
in Boston,
Right.
right next door to a museum. How classical can you
That's
get?
very classical. Right.
Right.
And Michael, how about your background in art? You came to it a little bit later.
Zero.
Yeah.
You had London Brager.
I sat in some art critique classes, but when I sat in them, I wasn't thinking about ever painting anything.
How did I think you once told me Joe was studying with him.
Yeah.
She brought you two together?
Yes.
Okay.
But basically, I never planned to be an artist. And this fellow, Leonard Brager, who was a teacher, a family friend, he twisted my arm.
Incidentally, a marvelous painter.
He shamed me into picking up a paintbrush and he said, paint. And I said, nothing I want to paint. He cursed at me, ran out the door, and I went, and the paint immediately spoke to me. And I can compare that to when I was writing books. It took a long time before the paper talked back to me. But with the paint, it was in 5 minutes from the first time I started painting. And then I was blessed, even though I didn't go to school to learn anything about art. This man came along and said, how about coming up for a weekend at my studio? Let's paint together. Let's make a painting together. I couldn't believe a grandmaster would invite this guy who couldn't even tell you what cadmium or teal was, in terms of paint. And by working with him, further developed, and we've been friends, colleagues now for all these years.
For all those years. So you actually, in I guess the vocabulary, you're actually considered, it's outside art. It's an outsider in terms of, they've got museum of outside art. People that are not classically trained are outside that field.
No restraints.
And you are, so you went to school many, many years ago. How have in your view, because you've watched other artists, how have things changed in your profession?
Oh, remarkably, remarkably. Yeah, when I first met Leonard, I think we became involved in addressing the issue of what to do with our work, and Leonard was very good at organizing groups, and before you know it, he was renting spaces for exhibits, and then it just naturally occurred one day to, why don't we paint together? So it was a phenomenal challenge. And so we've got a big painting on a wall, and I stay on one side, he stay on the other. And then every 10 or 15 minutes, we would switch. That he would work on my work, I work on his work, and we kept doing this back and forth.
So how was that an easy thing, or did you
Well,
have to get used to it, or how did that?
Well, there was no way to predict what was going to happen. And and Leonard, of course, was one of those people, very bright. He had figured out more or less where this all was going. I had no idea. And then every so often he'd say, "Stop! That's it." And
have you experienced a similar thing when you all worked together? When you,
no, he never does that.
No, but you've painted together,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so how is that in terms? What do you do with ego? What do you have a vision, and you have a vision, and you cross over? How does that work? Like he's going into your space at a point and doing his thing on your space, vice versa. How does that feel, and what do you do with that?
Well, my ego, I have a great ego, but it doesn't emerge when I work with Harry. I see when I work with Harry, I'm getting an opportunity to add his thoughts and his skills to my own head and also to the canvas. And he does things on my canvas that sometimes works and really helps me out. Other times he does things that when he goes home, I can't use it. But at the end of the day, I have learned a lot. And
So talk about that. What have you learned? What would you say would be the 1, 2 things that you say, this is my Harry Cohen legacy. These are the several important things that I've learned from this gentleman.
don't be so serious. Don't think it all out. Don't plan everything. Just stick the paintbrush into a big bucket of paint.
Well put,
and
Michael.
Just go.
See what happens. See what happens.
Yeah. Dive in fast, and then just like making a business plan, and then go back and start modifying. And
that's his great strength.
Yeah.
His ability to allow the medium to suggest and organize his thoughts.
Got it.
So he thinks beautifully into paint.
Into paint.
Boy, let me tell you, that's a very rare skill. You almost just can't teach it.
Right. So it's a natural. It's a natural skill.
Yes.
So vice versa. Putting that question to you, in working with Michael, and even though he's come to it later in life, and you've been doing it a very long time, what has he taught you?
Well, his innate ability to think in terms that stimulate me as well. He's become a kind of a natural collaborator, associate.
That's fantastic.
So oftentimes when we're fooling with paint, we're overlapping. I'm making a stroke, he makes a stroke, I make a stroke on top of his, blah, blah. But basically, we're both in harmonic. We're both in harmony.
So you speak
very easy.
It's
like I don't have to, I don't have to have him tell me what he was trying to do. I could just see it.
Right.
If you're around art, as I have been a long time, you can read it just like a novel. It has its own language. And so when you're painting, it's a different language. If you don't get it, you don't see it. You don't know the language.
So let me ask you a question. You go to your studio every day, if not almost every day.
Yeah.
Are there days you walk out of that studio and say, ugh, wow?
Oh, often.
Often?
Oh, yes, yes. That's part of art too.
And,
Is if
and
you,
what
if,
makes you do that? What
Well,
what happened in that studio that you walked out and said, it wasn't the day today?
because failure is part of art.
Hmm.
It's part of life. It's also part of painting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is what separates boys from men.
Hmm. I would
You know,
agree.
The kids,
On many levels.
the kids fit. The kids quit.
Yeah, yeah.
But if he's tough.
He is
Oh,
tough.
if he didn't have the character, you know, to fool around and have clumsy days.
Right.
So
So
he comes back.
he does come back, and let me ask you, because you used the word about Michael about collaborator, and you've had Leonard Brager was a collaborator
yes,
of
yes.
yours. Talk to me about, if I say to you the term Bagel Boys,
What comes to mind?
what comes to mind?
Old men who've had lots of experience, who need something to fill up their life.
So just for our viewers, there's a group of guys, and they're called the Bagel Boys. You are a bagel boy,
I'm a
and
bagel
you
boy.
meet at a place, you have bagels and coffee, you talk about what you talk about. Talk a little bit about that
Well,
experience.
Most of the time, it's not about art. It's just about life, interests. We've had like Marcus, who we lost. Marcus, he was a performer, a folk singer. He did takeoffs on popular folk singers, and so he would talk about his entertainment experiences. Peter was a contractor, and he talked about his houses that he owned. And so basically, we weren't really talking about art. We were just talking about life. And so there was probably a lot of exaggeration, lots of talk about women, of course,
Okay.
and about pleasures in life.
Right.
You know.
How often do you meet?
And it got down to about like one time a week. And Tuesday seemed to satisfy everybody. And it was pleasant.
That's great.
It's satisfying.
And you still do it.
And not only that, then we would get together and go to museums. And then we had peripheral friends who lived down the peninsula. And so we started to organize little meetings. We have one friend who has a little studio in Hunters Point. And then we have one down on, I think, Redwood City. So it became a kind of a vehicle.
A kind of vehicle. Speaking of which, you're working on a big project right now.
Yes.
You're doing California's energy plan.
Well,
In
we
painting-
call it California's climate
Climate plan.
But energy is, I'm looking at all 6 goals and I'm interpreting them on large 15-foot canvases. But you asked Harry a question what does he get from me? And this is an example. I'm working on this big project, and goal number 6 is safeguard California. I say that to Harry. I gotta paint somehow safeguarding California. And you know what Harry says to me? Michael, what about painting the governor, Governor Jerry Brown, on a horse, holding a shield, and maybe give him a few Don Quixote characteristics? That's what Harry brings to me. What I bring to him is the challenges that I have to face.
Yes.
I'm facing. And then he says, hey, Michael, why don't I go and paint that goal for you?
Are you going to paint? Are you going to be part of this? Are you going to be painting this?
I'm going to tackle the 6-foot painting of Jerry Brown.
Really?
I have no idea how it's going to work out. We'll see.
When you, in your methodology of work, does it show itself at the canvas, or is it in your mind and you bring it into the canvas? How do you work?
No. the way it works out is I'll look at his photographs and kind of make a little plan in my head.
Mhm.
How do I want to do it? And of course, I can do it in several ways. So I have to decide more or less. But if one doesn't work, I'd switch over
Right.
quickly, naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll put down something, and if the gesture works, I'll expand on it.
Right.
If it don't, I try something else.
Right.
Yeah.
So yours is
Oh yes, yes. Patience in art is a big virtue. Big virtue.
it's a very, very big virtue.
Yeah,
No, I can't.
yeah,
I think that's
You
probably
don't
true.
always spontaneously. Something happens. When it does happen, you're very grateful.
So when you look on your artistic life, which continues to thrive, who were influences for you?
Who would I? What?
Who were influences for you in your artistic
Now,
thinking?
now.
Well, not necessarily
No.
now, but as your development and
yes,
as you
yes,
continue.
yes,
Who was
yes.
that? do you
When I
think?
was young in school, I fell in love with the museum. It was my first experience. I had never been in a museum, and in those days, the Boston Museum was kind of an old-fashioned institute that had very, very few people per day would use. So the halls were basically empty. So as a kid next door, I would go there in my spare time, and I got to know all these masters, and and I fell in love with them.
Right.
I said,
Any
wow.
any in particular that you?
Oh yes, Goya, Rembrandt, El Greco, Velasquez, Rubens, many, Turner, and Boston Museum, in some respects, had excellent examples. Because first of all, it's a very wealthy city, or was, and a lot of collectors gave their works to the Boston Museum, and over a couple of years, they developed some wonderful things, collections.
Big collection.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, they have Gauguin, for an example, did this enormous epic. I know he would love it. It's of Tahiti. It's about 10 feet, 12 feet, and it goes back about 35 feet. Done on burlap, sewn burlap together,
Huh.
because he painted in Tahiti. And then on top of the epic, it's all maidens and do more or less. It's even paradise, only Tahiti,
Yes.
and it addresses those marvelous questions. Who are we? Where are we going? In French.
Yeah. No, that's great. And same to you. Who is influence? I know Harry has a huge influence that you've
Yes.
talked about. Who else
And
influences
keep
you?
in mind, I really never studied the masters, but I respect a lot of them, and I learned some things from it. Hieronymus Bosch.
Oh yeah.
Am I pronouncing his name correctly? Hieronymus
Yes.
Bosch
Oh, marvelous.
is one I like a lot.
Why?
Well,
For him. Why?
Well, he has an incredibly creative mind. He sees weird, wild animals, and he sees eggs that are walking along the ground.
Yes.
He's
and then,
way out.
then looking at knowing your work, he and you both use large patterns. And I think you got that from him. Why not?
Yeah. Speaking of large,
do you know Bosch's
yes,
work?
I do. I
Oh,
do.
yes.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. We're kind of getting toward the end. This is a very fast half hour. I have a question for both of you, and we don't have a lot of time, but what most surprises you about the other? What surprises you about Michael?
About Michael?
Yeah, what surprises you?
Oh gosh, he's one out of 10 million who could pick up and do what he does in such a short, brief time. But Leonard and I were puzzled. Where the hell did it come from? Where did this guy get? It's obviously innate. He didn't go to school. He didn't learn How the hell did he? How was he able to organize in paint? Very difficult.
Yeah.
Pick up a brush sometime.
No, it's not.
Well, it's that I'm moving it around.
Mhm.
Whoa.
It's going off the deep end. You really
Oh,
dive into
we-
the deep end.
We
on
were
that.
both
Yeah,
very impressed.
that's
And for
fantastic.
Leonard to be impressed,
That's already something.
oh,
That's already something.
he was so critical.
And Michael, how about you with regard to Harry? What most surprises you about Harry?
Oh, yes, I've got to add, he's such a fine human being.
Ah, okay.
I
Okay.
don't want to leave that out.
Thank you. One, he's not only always there to help me when I ask for help. The other thing is he is so alive. New ideas keep coming out of his mind once I get him started. And I never have thought about this, or that. And one of them is something I can grab onto. And Harry is always there for me.
Yeah.
Although he did not get me in the documentary, nor did he call
No, but it-
upon
but-
me
but
for
it all-
help.
But it all gets back to reading. I can read. I can tell you, if I look at a painting, I can tell you where the guy went, where his head was, and the result.
Right.
Whether, yeah.
Right. To know it on the deepest of levels.
It's like reading a book.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Are you
So
optimistic?
could Leonard.
Are you optimistic in the few moments we have left? Are you optimistic about
Oh,
the
yes.
future of art?
Oh, yes. I've had a good life. Had a good life, Jonathan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
You certainly have. And you've given.
I have a good body of work, and I think the best of it will probably survive.
I think so. I definitely think
Yeah,
so. No,
yeah.
you certainly have given all of us a great gift. Both of you have given us great gifts, and keep our minds and imaginations open. And I know
Yes.
that our
Well stated.
and I know that our viewership, I'm sure, is really, after viewing this, going to be very excited to see how the two of you collaborate and what the two of you come up with regard to the big project that you're working on, the climate plan for California, and your Safeguarding California large 6-foot painting. It has been the greatest joy to have the opportunity to talk to both of you. I hope you have enjoyed this adventure that we've had on the Killen Report today. I am Jonathan Clyde. It has been my great pleasure to be with you and these two wonderful artists. Take care.